Thanksgiving at my aunt's house always felt like attending a play where everyone already had their roles, and mine was the disappointment in plaid. It started in the driveway. I pulled up in my pickup, old, loud, reliable, and mine. Parked right between my cousin Spencer's Audi and Uncle Rick's leased Mercedes like some kind of punchline. And honestly, that set the tone. Inside, the air smelled like turkey, cologne, and superiority. My mom was already flitting around, cheeks tight with tension, whispering things like, "Kyle, at least pretend you're happy to be here." As if pretending was ever my problem. I wasn't ungrateful. I just didn't fit. While the rest of the family was climbing ladders in finance, real estate, and digital marketing or whatever buzzword my cousin Chloe was obsessed with that week, I was under hoods, fixing busted transmissions, hands black with grease. See, I didn't go to college. I didn't even apply. At 17, while my classmates were stressing over SATs and scholarship essays, I was already elbow deep in a busted Civic, working weekends at Joe's garage. Not glamorous, but it paid for food. And rent. And eventually, my own damn shop. By 24, I'd saved enough to lease a space and slap my name on the front, Kyle's Auto and Repair. The kind of place with one bathroom, no heat in winter, and a fridge full of energy drinks. But it was mine. No investors. No startup seed funding. No help from mom and dad. Just 12-hour days, one loan I killed myself to repay, and a customer base I built by staying honest. But to my family? I was still just a mechanic. At every gathering, someone would crack a joke. Still elbow deep in engine guts? Heard you work with your hands, guess college wasn't for everyone. One time, Aunt Patty even asked if I'd consider going back to school to get a real career. She said it gently, like I was a dog they hadn't given up on yet. But that year's Thanksgiving? That was the last straw. Dinner was the same as always, a weird mix of dry turkey, overcooked green beans, and tension so thick you could carve it. I sat next to the kitchen door, far from the center where the real conversations happened. Fine by me. Then Uncle Rick, loud, balding, full of opinions and garlic mashed potatoes, turned to me mid-bite and said, loud enough for the kids' table to hear, "So, Kyle, still a wrench monkey?" The room froze. And then, of course, came the laughter. Chloe giggled behind her wine glass. Spencer snorted, almost choking on his stuffing. Even my mom chuckled, but in that please don't ruin this day kind of way. I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the gravy pooling on my plate. At the store-bought cranberry slices trembling like they were just as uncomfortable as I was. I wanted to say something. Anything. But I knew how that went. If I snapped back, I'd be the dramatic one. Sensitive Kyle. Always so touchy. The guy who couldn't take a joke. So I stayed quiet. Let them laugh. Let the moment pass. Uncle Rick added, "Maybe one day you'll fix up something nice and join us in the big leagues, huh?" That was it. Something in me cracked, silently, like a bolt stripped smooth. I looked up. Met his eyes. Smiled. And decided right then, this would be my last Thanksgiving with them. No announcement. No drama. Just a quiet mental exit. After dinner, while the others argued over who'd take home the leftover pie, I slipped out the back door. No one noticed. I climbed into my pickup, turned the key, and felt the familiar rumble under me. And for the first time all evening, I felt like myself again. The day after Thanksgiving, I was back in my shop before the sun even considered rising. The place smelled like rubber, metal, and cheap coffee, the holy trinity of small-town survival. I flipped the switch. Buzzing fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The heater groaned to life like an old man getting out of bed, and I got started on another round of jobs that wouldn't finish themselves. While everyone else was still in bed, probably digesting turkey and pretending they liked their in-laws, I was sorting parts invoices and prepping the workbench for a busted Jeep that had made a sound like a dying goat on its way in. And honestly, I preferred this. No pretending. No fake hugs. Just honest work. Me, my tools, and engines that didn't care whether or not you wore loafers or had a LinkedIn. Still, I couldn't get Rick's voice out of my head. Wrench monkey. It wasn't the insult itself. I'd heard worse. It was the laughter. That lazy, effortless kind that said we've all agreed what you are, and it ain't much. I'd worked too damn hard to be reduced to a punchline at a table where I was barely even a guest. Back in high school, when I told people I wasn't going to college, most nodded with that sympathetic look, the one people give shelter dogs. Well, they'd say, everyone's journey is different. Like I had just been diagnosed with failure. My journey started with a jack and a rusted-out Civic. At 18, I was doing oil changes out of a leaky garage and getting paid in cash and leftover pizza. At 21, I was pulling double shifts at a warehouse to save up. At 24, I signed a lease on my first shop, 900 square feet of concrete, flickering lights, and hope. Now, I had a customer list longer than Uncle Rick's ego. But you wouldn't know it from my family. To them, I was just Kyle, the one who fixes stuff. I was good to call when the car wouldn't start, or the AC died, or when someone needed a discount. But respect? Nah. That was reserved for my cousin with the marketing degree who once sold oatmeal via TikTok. Whatever. I kept grinding. Head down, heart up. Business grew. Slowly, then steadily. I hired Miguel, 17, quiet, smarter than he knew. The kid had instincts, and I paid him well because I knew what it meant to be overlooked. The shop became more than work. It became my world. A place I didn't have to justify myself. A place where sweat meant something. Still, the silence from family events stung sometimes. Christmas came. I closed the shop. Scrolled through social media. There they were, all gathered around a fake fireplace, drinking wine, posting. So grateful for family, while I sat alone, microwaving a burrito. Not one call. Not one. Merry Christmas. Just memes, wine glasses, and a tagged photo of someone wearing the flannel I left at Mom's house 2 years ago. But that ache? It faded fast when I opened the shop again and saw a line waiting before 8 a.m. When a single mom cried because I fixed her brakes and told her to pay me later. When Miguel asked if he could bring his brother in to help part-time. I had built something they couldn't see. Then, 2 years after that last Thanksgiving, karma circled back, quiet, sharp, and ironic as hell. Miguel and I were working on a beat-up Ford Ranger when he looked up from his phone. Yo, you see this? He handed it to me. A local real estate auction listing. Bold red letters at the bottom. Eviction. Foreclosure. Owner Richard B. Monroe. Uncle Rick. I blinked. Then blinked again. My rag dropped straight into the engine bay. Miguel raised an eyebrow. You know him? I smirked, wiping my hands slowly. Yeah, I said. He once called me a wrench monkey. Miguel laughed. Guess the wrench monkey still got a roof. The listing stayed on my mind for days. I didn't text anyone. Didn't screenshot it to send to old classmates. I just let it sit, like a warning light on the dashboard. Quiet, blinking, impossible to ignore. Rick's place wasn't just some random property. It was his pride. The crown jewel of his passive income empire. A duplex on Elm with chipped shutters and a bad roof, but to him, it was proof he'd made it. He used to brag about it every Thanksgiving, swirling his wine like a villain in a business movie. Rent rolls in while I sleep, he'd say. Tenants basically pay my mortgage. He didn't even remember their names. But I bet they remembered his. I kept checking the auction site once a week. Not because I needed it. The shop was doing just fine, better than fine. I had just signed a deal servicing fleet vehicles for a local plumbing company. Miguel was almost full-time. I even bought a used work van to expand. I wasn't looking to buy property out of revenge. But when that duplex came up, it felt inevitable. So I bid. Not under my name, I wasn't stupid. I used the LLC my bookkeeper helped me form for tax reasons. Real quiet. No big announcement. Just one of a dozen names on a spreadsheet to whoever was handling the auction. And when the confirmation came in? Green check. Winning bidder confirmed. I didn't cheer. I didn't punch the air. I just sat there for a second. Let it sink in. I remembered the first time I ever saw that building. I was 16. Rick had pulled up in his SUV, looked at the place, and said, "Ugly as hell, but Cash doesn't care about pretty." Now? It was mine. Every creaky floorboard. Every leaky pipe. Every forgotten tenant whose maintenance request went unanswered. So I got to work, quietly. The tenants stayed. I didn't raise rent. Instead, I fixed the heat, replaced the locks, had someone patch the roof, and sent each unit a holiday card with my contact info, just a note from the new owner, signed with initials they wouldn't recognize. Meanwhile, word about Rick started circling like flies around a stalled radiator. Turns out his empire was more like a Jenga tower built on IOUs. Contractors unpaid. Tenants angry. Some shady refinancing deal fell through. One of his other rentals had a mold problem. And cherry on top, his second wife, Elaine, moved out and took the espresso machine. Apparently she needed space to reset. That space, reportedly, included a yoga retreat and an instructor named Trent. Everyone else seemed shocked. I wasn't. Rick was always one power outage away from collapse. His confidence was a costume. His advice was recycled from self-help podcasts. I'd seen people like him my whole life. Loud, suit-wearing GPS dependents who wouldn't last one day in a crawl space with a busted fuel line. Then one afternoon I saw him. I'd stopped by the local grocery store, just grabbing snacks and coolant. He was in the frozen aisle, holding a boxed turkey pot pie and looking like someone had unplugged him. Pale. Unshaven. Wearing that same elbow patch blazer he used to strut around in, only now, it hung on him like it knew it was ashamed to be there. He hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe he had and looked away. But what I did see. A flyer in his cart. Torn edges. Room for rent, furnished basement, no pets. I stared at it for a second longer than I meant to. He turned, met my eyes. And in that split second, I could tell, he recognized me. But didn't know what I knew. Didn't know what I owned. Didn't know whose name was on the deed of the place he'd just been evicted from. I gave him the smallest smile. Not smug. Just knowing. He nodded, awkwardly. Didn't speak. I didn't either. Because the best part about being the wrench monkey is when they think you're still turning bolts, while you're holding the entire building they're trying to live in. The invitation came in a group text. That's how I found out I was still on the family radar, somewhere below spam emails and above expired coupons. Mom sent it. Thanksgiving at Chloe's this year. Potluck style. Bring something. Red heart. No greeting. No context. Just a blanket message to 18 people, half of whom I hadn't spoken to since they forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. For a second, I hovered over the Leave group button like it owed me rent. But then, I didn't. Not because I wanted to go. But because something in me, something petty, quiet, and deeply amused, whispered, why not? I'd been invisible to them for years. Let them keep thinking that. Let them think I was still the same grease-stained guy eating cold sandwiches in a garage with no future and a rusty coffee machine. Let them assume I'd crawl in through the back, leave early, and maybe, just maybe, they'd be kind enough to save me a paper plate wrapped in foil. This year? I had other plans. And the best part? They invited me. So I said yes. I texted back one word. Sure. Didn't elaborate. Didn't ask who was bringing what. Didn't offer to bring a dish. And no one followed up. It was like my response existed in a vacuum, just enough to clear their guilt, not enough to warrant engagement. Perfect. Thanksgiving came fast. Chloe's house was nice. Newly renovated. Generic granite countertops and farmhouse decor, probably curated from an influencer's Pinterest board. I arrived last. Not late. Just last. My truck was parked discreetly 2 blocks away. I walked the rest of the way, dressed neatly, black jeans, boots polished, a clean button-up, and a watch that cost more than Rick's current deposit. Miguel had given it to me last month as a thank you gift for promoting him to lead technician. I hadn't worn it yet. Felt like the occasion. When I walked in, nobody noticed at first. The party was in full swing, laughter, wine, half-warmed casseroles, Rick already 3 drinks in and doing that thing where he jokes loudly so everyone knows he's fine. I stood in the doorway for a second, taking it all in. Then Mom saw me. "Oh, Kyle, you made it." That same surprise tone people use when the neighbor's cat comes back after vanishing for a week. I nodded. "Yeah. Wouldn't miss it." I walked past Rick. He didn't look up. Chloe hugged me like I was a stranger she didn't want to offend. Spencer gave me a chin nod. And Patty said, "Wow, you clean up nice." Like she expected me to show up covered in axle grease and holding a wrench like Thor's budget cousin. I didn't say much. Just smiled. Dinner started not long after. I sat near the end of the table. Not the kid table, but not the middle either. Strategically placed, just far enough from the spotlight. The food was fine. Conversation was predictable. Chloe talked about her brand deal. Spencer complained about airport lounges. Rick, of course, started going on about how hard it is to find quality rental properties now that the market's gone to hell. I chewed slowly. The turkey was dry. Again. At some point, Chloe turned to Rick and asked casually, "So what happened with that old duplex you used to rent out?" Rick scoffed. "Oh, that place? Long gone. Bunch of nonsense with the bank. Some nobody bought it at auction. Probably turning it into a meth lab." Laughter. I didn't laugh. I just kept sipping my water, quietly calculating how long I'd let this charade stretch. Then Chloe added, "Wait, didn't you say you don't even know who bought it?" Rick rolled his eyes. "Yeah, some LLC or whatever. Never met the guy." I set my fork down gently, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and smiled, wide this time. The moment was coming. But I wasn't rushing it. Because sometimes the best way to serve a dish isn't cold. It's slow roasted, carved carefully, and plated right in front of the person who called you a wrench monkey while your name was on their eviction papers. And dinner was far from over. Rick didn't know. That was the best part. He was still sitting there, elbows on the table like he owned the place, sipping boxed Cabernet and cutting into dry turkey as if the universe hadn't personally handed him an eviction notice wrapped in karma. I watched him for a moment. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. He still had that puffed chest and gold chain peeking out of his open collar, but there was something hollow behind the eyes now. Like a guy still pretending to play poker, even after losing his last chip. Across the table, Chloe started talking about real estate. Again. She had just bought a condo in Florida with natural light and smart appliances, as if the refrigerator's ability to connect to Wi-Fi was a personality trait. "Investing young is the key," she chirped, swirling her mimosa like she was being interviewed. Rick jumped in like clockwork. "I told you years ago, real estate's how you build wealth. You know I had 4 properties at one point?" Had. Past tense. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. Aunt Patty nodded along, eyes glazed over. She was halfway through a sweet potato casserole and had clearly checked out 2 Rick Braggs ago. Then Spencer leaned forward, all smug. "Yeah, but the market's trash now. Too many broke people trying to get in." And that got Rick going. He launched into a mini rant about lowball buyers and people who gamed the system. How someone sniped his Elm Street property right out from under him because the bank didn't play fair. Chloe blinked. "Wait, wasn't that the duplex with the peeling shutters?" Rick sighed like he was recalling a fallen empire. "Yeah. Someone bought it through an LLC. Guy probably doesn't even know what a P&L statement is." I cleared my throat softly. The room glanced my way briefly. I leaned forward casually. "Actually," I said, setting my water down, "LLCs are pretty common in property deals. Keeps things clean on the tax side." Rick raised an eyebrow. "What would you know about that?" I smiled. "You'd be surprised." He smirked, clearly not threatened. Well, if you ever want to see how it's really done, I've got a few contacts left. Chloe laughed. Maybe Kyle can fix up the new guy's meth lab. Cue more laughter. I chuckled too, softly. Then stabbed a green bean. It was incredible how comfortable people got insulting you when they were convinced you weren't competition. I let the silence hang a little longer this time. Then looked over at Rick. Funny thing, though. About that duplex. He paused mid-sip. Yeah? I shrugged. I drove by it the other day. Looks decent. Windows replaced. Shutters fixed. Heat works now. Spencer raised a brow. How do you know the heat works? Another shrug. Just figured the new owner probably handled it. Rick snorted. Whoever bought it overpaid. That place was a nightmare. Tenants always complaining. Plumbing shot. Mold in the attic. I smiled. Not anymore. He tilted his head. You know the guy or something? I looked around the table. All eyes on me now. Chloe was half laughing, expecting a punchline. Spencer was chewing slowly like his brain had just started buffering. I took a long sip of water, then leaned back in my chair. Yeah, I said, calm as a Sunday. I'm the guy. Silence. The kind that wraps around a room and chokes the air out of it. Rick stared. Spencer dropped his fork. Chloe blinked like someone hit pause on her TikTok feed. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded copy of the ownership deed. Placed it gently on the table, right next to the cranberry sauce. Rick's name, scratched out. Mine, bold, clean, final. I own it now, I said softly. Fixed it up. Made it livable. Even met the tenants, lovely people. One of them even made me cookies. Mom whispered. Wait, you bought Rick's? Yup. Rick opened his mouth, then closed it again. Like a fish, flopping on the tablecloth, looking for water in a room full of wine. I let it breathe. No gloating. No mic drop. Just a quiet truth, set on the table like a well-roasted turkey. I leaned in just slightly. And Rick? I added, my voice just low enough to keep it private. Thanks for the discount. No one said a word. Not for a full 15 seconds. In family time, that's an eternity. Rick just sat there. Hands frozen on his knife and fork like someone had unplugged him mid-slice. His jaw shifted slightly, but no sound came out. Chloe's mouth was open, a frozen screenshot of disbelief, and Spencer suddenly found his mashed potatoes deeply fascinating. I took a bite of stuffing. Dry. Still worth it. Mom blinked a few times, like her brain was trying to reboot. So, you really bought it? She finally asked, her voice soft. Yup. By yourself? I wiped my mouth. No, I said flatly. I called Elon Musk for backup. Spencer choked on a laugh. And Patty gasped. Chloe tried to smile like nothing was awkward and failed miserably. Rick still hadn't moved. It was almost impressive, how still a man could go when everything he stood for was yanked out from under him in public. Like watching a statue realize it had been carved with the wrong face. Then finally, he spoke. You think this makes you better than me? I set my fork down. No, I said, calm as ever. I think fixing everything you neglected makes me a decent landlord. The fact that you made it so easy? That's just a bonus. Aunt Patty sputtered. Kyle, don't you think that's a little? No, I cut in, still steady. I don't. I leaned forward slightly. When I was doing oil changes for $50 in a garage with no heater, none of you asked how I was doing. No one offered help. No one called. But now that I own something one of you lost, suddenly I'm worth a reaction? No one argued. They just shifted uncomfortably in their seats, like the table itself had grown too small for their silence. Rick finally looked up at me, really looked. You planned this, he muttered. I met his eyes. Nope. I just didn't throw away opportunities the way you threw away roofs and broken heaters and ignored your tenants. He went quiet again. Mom tried to change the subject, bless her performative heart. So, Kyle, are you seeing anyone? I raised an eyebrow. Seeing? Like therapy? Sure. I own a business. That's basically required. Chloe laughed nervously. No one knew what to say next. Even the cranberry sauce looked uncomfortable. I let it sit. Let the discomfort marinate in everything they hadn't noticed for years. Then pushed my chair back, slowly. I should head out, I said, stretching slightly. Early shift tomorrow. Working Thanksgiving weekend? Spencer asked, his voice half mocking, half genuinely confused. I smiled. No. Just doing payroll. For my team. That landed like a bowling ball. Chloe looked stunned. You have a team? Yeah. Hired my first guy 2 years ago. We're up to 6 now. A beat of silence. Then Rick, low, bitter. All that from fixing cars? I tilted my head. No, Rick. All that from not wasting time laughing at people who fix cars. And with that, I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door. No dramatics. No slammed doors. No fiery speech. Just a soft, simple exit. On the way out, Chloe called after me. Kyle, wait. I turned. She looked unsure. A little pale. Why didn't you ever tell us? I shrugged. Didn't think anyone was listening. Then I looked at Rick, still seated, still stunned. By the way, I added, almost as an afterthought, your former tenant said hi. He didn't respond. Didn't have to. That silence? That was the loudest thing he'd said all night. I stepped out into the cold. The air felt clearer somehow. Like I'd finally exhaled something I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Got in my truck. Rolled down the window. Let the wind sting my face. It felt clean. Free. Like I just changed the oil in my whole life, and left the filter on their table. The next morning, I was back in the shop by 7 a.m. No hangover. No regrets. Just coffee, the hum of the heater, and the clink of tools waking up before the town did. Miguel was already there, unlocking the bay doors. You're early, he said. I nodded. Just needed some peace. He didn't ask. Didn't need to. One of the best things about real friends, they don't need the full story to offer you the right kind of silence. I walked through the shop like I always did, taking in the place. The concrete floors. The smell of oil and brake dust. The little corner where we kept the coffee and bagels on Fridays. The old photo on the wall, me, greasy, holding the keys on opening day. I remembered that day clearly. No one from the family showed up. Not one. And yet here I was. Years later. Still standing. Stronger than ever. There was something satisfying about knowing I'd built it all from scratch. With scraped knuckles, second-hand tools, and a phone full of rejected voicemails. No trust fund. No safety net. Just stubbornness and late nights and the refusal to stay a joke in someone else's story. By noon, we knocked out 2 tire rotations, a radiator install, and an AC repair. Regular Friday stuff. Until I got a text from Chloe. Chloe. Hey, just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know how much you'd done. Guess I never asked? You ever want to talk, I'm here. I stared at it for a long time. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. In the end, I didn't reply. Not out of spite, just, what was there to say? That I appreciated her apology? That it came a few years and one eviction too late? Instead, I slid my phone back into my pocket and kept working. Let the actions speak. Later that afternoon, a tenant from the duplex texted me too. Tenant Marcia. Happy holidays, Mr. Kyle. The heater works perfectly, thanks again. I left a little something on the porch for you. Hope you like gingerbread. That one made me smile. I swung by after work. Sure enough, there was a small tin on the front step with a bow and a note that said, Landlords like you are rare. I wasn't used to that kind of praise. Still felt weird sometimes. But I was starting to believe it. I drove home slowly that night. No music. Just the hum of tires and the soft ping of cooling metal from the engine. It was strange, how quiet the world could be after years of noise. The kind of noise that sounded like dismissive laughter, or backhanded compliments, or the word wrench monkey, said loud enough for the room to laugh but quiet enough to deny later. That noise was gone now. Replaced with something better. Something earned. At a red light, I looked out the window and realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel like proving anything. I didn't need applause or recognition. I had what I wanted. My own name. On the deed. On the shop. On the respect I never asked for, but earned anyway. Almost exactly 2 years after that Thanksgiving, I was invited to another dinner. But not by family. This one came from my duplex tenants. Marcia, the older woman from Unit 2B, sent me an email. We're hosting a community dinner for the holidays. You're more than welcome to stop by. We'd love to thank you in person. I didn't usually go to tenant events. Always figured I should give people space, not show up like I was the hero of their story. But this time? This one felt different. So I brought pie. When I arrived, there were maybe 20 people, neighbors, kids running around with paper crowns, someone's golden retriever sleeping under the buffet table. The smell of cinnamon and roasting vegetables filled the hall. It was loud, warm, messy, nothing like Chloe's pristine dinner table. And somehow, 1,000 times better. I was halfway through a conversation with a retired mechanic named Rudy when someone tapped my shoulder. "Excuse me," a voice said. I turned. It was Rick. Holding a takeout container and looking like a man who hadn't had a good meal, or a good night's sleep, in a while. We stared at each other for a second. "How'd you even?" I started. "I live 2 streets over," he said. "Marcia invited me. Didn't know you'd be here. Didn't know you'd be welcome," I replied. He flinched, just slightly. Then he looked around. "They all know? That I'm the owner?" He nodded. I smiled. "Yeah. They do." He was quiet again. Eventually he mumbled. "The place looks good." I nodded. "It does. Because I care." Rick exhaled like it hurt. "You did what I couldn't." "No," I said. "I did what you wouldn't." He didn't argue. Didn't even stay. Just left his takeout container on the table and walked out, hands in his pockets, head low. That night, Marcia handed me a little thank you card signed by every tenant. Inside was a photo, the whole group, smiling in front of the duplex. I put it on my office wall, right next to the framed deed. And underneath it, I hung a tiny wrench. Painted gold.